All right, now let's discuss this. What does this all mean for you and me? We're now joined via Zoom by Professor Hartmut Winkler, energy analyst and physicist at University of Johannesburg. We're also joined by Ruse Moleshe, an energy infrastructure financial planner. Thank you so much to you both for joining me this afternoon. So the much anticipated energy action plan to tackle South Africa's power crisis finally being announced. Your reaction, let's start with you, Prof. Do you think the plan addresses the right interventions to overcome this immediate crisis?
Yes, I think the plan is good. I wouldn't have done it much different than that. And he's been following pretty much what his advisory panels have been telling him to do. So in that sense, it's classical Ramaphosa. He does follow this process where he wants the body on board first. It took a bit longer than people were hoping for, but now he's come up with something. Everything he's announced can help. Should I ever caution that some of these things are going to make just a very minute difference? So nobody should be expecting load shedding to be over in the next month or even the next 2 years or so. We are going to persist having problems. But we're at least now following the right sort of strategy to eventually get things sorted out. That's, of course, provided the implementation follows, which is always the other big question mark. But certainly the plan, as far as I'm concerned, is very good.
Okay, we're going to get to the nitty-gritties in terms of just some of these measures and what he proposes. But Ruse, let me bring you into this conversation now. I want us to look at one of the actions announced, particularly the additional measures to achieve long-term energy security and ending load shedding, which we know, of course, is not going to happen in the near future for good. But we know that Eskom cannot service its debt currently, which is around 400 billion rand. This priority, then what can we expect given the budgets involved here in terms of who will finance this and how will it pan out?
It's not coming out very clear in terms of the plan. The president mentioned that, for instance, in terms of the debt, that the minister during the medium-term budget policy statement will indicate what will happen to that debt. So we're waiting with bated breath to see how that will be resolved. He also mentioned that the budget for maintenance will be increased within Eskom. So we're waiting also to hear where that source of that funding will be coming from. So the interventions are good. The shortening of the environmental impact assessment study is something that can be quick, and it will help with the transmission infrastructure within Eskom. But all of these, the devil's in the detail in terms of when they will be able to be doable. For instance, the regional, mentioning the regional importing of power from Zambia and Botswana. There may be a need to reinforce that infrastructure, transmission infrastructure, before that importation can happen. We are not 100% sure. So all of those have a time lag within which they can happen. So it's a good plan and all of that, but all the devil's really in the detail.
Prof, of course, you hear Ruse saying there that the devil is in the detail. We know and we're hearing that, of course, this plan looks great on paper, but what can we realistically, look into in terms of the implementation? Some saying that it could take, in some instances, for this plan to be realized up to at least 10 years. But let's look at the first action, and that's of improving, the performance of Eskom's existing fleet of power stations. I know not too long ago, you raised some concerns in terms of some of the power plants, particularly Koeberg, nuclear power station.
Yes, that's an aspect where improvements are possible, but on the other hand, I don't really expect any major changes in the short term. They mentioned, for example, getting or trying to get some people that used to work for Eskom, that used to know the power stations very well, to come back, as though that's going to solve things very fast. I don't think it will. These are often people who have been away for quite a while and probably don't know how things are running right now. They also, I'm not so sure that they would leave wherever they're working now to all now suddenly come and join Eskom. So, yes, there would. it will help, but I don't expect a major improvement on that front. I think the best thing there is probably that they'll be able to buy spares much more quickly. Of course, one's got to be careful that the necessary checks and balances are still in place. But that was certainly one of the major things which used to hold back repairs. So if they can get that sorted out, at least it should shorten load shedding. That's probably the best thing as far as repairs itself is concerned. Other than that, yes, well, Eskom is supposed to be split into three that we've been hearing about for a while. He didn't say anything about, there has been confusion in recent weeks about Eskom, possible Eskom 2 and so on. He didn't say anything on that front, so I think that's pretty much now off the table. But apart from that, yes, one can only hope that Eskom will somehow be able to function more effectively, but I personally don't really foresee a major improvement, just a small one. It's also the whole question about does one have the right management team in place. I don't think it's that much a question of that. I don't think anybody can perform miracles at Eskom at the moment.
Ruse, the president also announcing, of course, that government would massively increase private investment, generation capacity. Talk to us about what it would mean and entail then in removing the licensing threshold.
Removing the licensing threshold would mean that the private sector can determine for themselves what works for them, and also in terms of the licensing regime, they are now going to use registration. Obviously, there still have to be checks and balances to make sure that there's compliance with grid codes. So that will help. However, also it should be noted, it depends where private sector is with respect to their projects, because all of these projects also have to still go through planning. They have to go through approvals, construction as well. It may help that the EIAs and red tapes in that respect will be shortened drastically. That may assist, but also they also still have to have willing and access to transmission infrastructure. So all of these things coming together are really dependent on where the projects are in terms of planning from the private sector entities. But it is a good thing that they are allowed to do as they please, also because they will be using their own balance sheet and not depending on government, unless it's the IPP program, in which case Eskom is the buyer.
Prof, I'd like you to come in there, just expand a little bit on what Ruse was saying, but also, just ending it with explaining on the threshold for private generators, at 100 megawatts being dropped altogether. And of course, the other all-important thing is, what does this mean for the end user and the costs involved? President there suggesting that they will be incentivizing households and of course businesses, to install rooftop solar panels. But of course, we know that that's not a cost that can be incurred by the average South African.
Yeah, I know a lot of commentators are very happy about the falling of this threshold. On the other hand, we must just consider 100 megawatts is huge. The solar farm you're showing the wind farm you're showing at the moment is roughly of that size. There's not many entities in this country which can build something of that magnitude. What I find interesting is that they're opening the door for consumers selling electricity back to the grid. That's something which happens in other countries. There's a number of factors which one needs to watch out for, which I don't want to go into too much detail with, but the idea that consumers can actually put back self-generated electricity onto the grid is something that we definitely need to go forward. There's going to be lots of discussions about how exactly what these tariffs are going to be and so on, and how exactly that's all going to pan out. I think that's going to preoccupy us a lot over the coming few years, but this, I think, was a very necessary step that the country needed to take in order to put itself in line with what's happening globally.
Prof, while I still have you on, I just need 30 seconds as you wrap this conversation, just on some of the things that President Cyril Ramaphosa used. I mean, he used the word immediately and long term. So in the immediate space, he's saying that, of course, fixing of Eskom and ensuring it boosts its capacity immediately. But where it relates to long term, of course, that's boosting renewable energy. Just 30 seconds in terms of how that will pan out.
Yes, well, they've announced that they're going to speed up the next round and double the next round of renewable projects construction. So that's good. That I think they were behind the fact that this can assist them in catching up, and the fact that there's a new plan coming. I think it's best to have an expert go through all the different models in that and then present that plan, and then we'll see how we'll progress in the decade after that.
All right, Ruse, and your 30 seconds as we wrap this conversation, just in terms of the next few days, what are we likely to see?
On my side, with Bitwin, in the next few days, I mean, I think that in the next few days, I think that the devil really is going to be in the detail. I think what will need to be done is to look at what the president has said, and these government departments will have to sit down and say practically how are these going to pan out. I question, for instance, the bid window 5 having been awarded already and retrospectively changing things, what that will mean for other bidders that have not been successful. So there's a lot of detail that needs to be gone into.
All right. Thank you so much to you both. Really appreciate your time. Professor Hartmut Winkler there and Ruse Moleshe. Thank you so much for your time. Of course, in the main, the plan is being held. But of course, as Ruse Moleshe said there, the devil is really in the detail.